Hey guys, it's Jess, and I am here with Grief 101.4. Um, so, I kind of had some thoughts on my mind about how grief has changed in our communities through the years. I think we can probably all remember from history books or just history classes in general that there was a time when a spouse would pass and or child, which happened a lot more back in the day. And what would happen is we would wear black and we would, you know, send that signal out to everybody else that we were going through grief. And it was known to everybody in our community because we were a community and our communities were small. So when somebody passed away, everybody joined together. And they usually joined together at some place like a park or something. And we would call those today cemeteries, but back then they were like parks, and that's where people would gather to show their sorrow and their sadness about the loss of this person. Um, but that was also during a time where houses were built where we laid our loved ones out in their death for people to come and see them. There was like a death room, and houses, we planned for this, and our houses were made in such a way that we had a door big enough for our death room for a coffin to come in and out. And people would, for a week or two, basically do a vigil over this individual. And wow. Wow. And this was back before more modern death techniques. So there was often a smell of death. And so that's where we came up with like putting lilies or some other type of flowers out to try to mask that smell. But we left our dead family members or dead loved ones in our house for people to come and pray over or say their goodbyes. And then things changed, and they changed greatly. And I can't even give you a date for when that happened, but things changed to where everything became more formal. People that died went to a hospital. They went to a morgue. They were embalmed. They went to cemeteries. There were no more parks. Our parks were now cemeteries. And, back then, back in the day, women, in particular, I'm thinking women, but I'm sure men were too, they'd wear a black dress for like a year. And that was a signal to everybody, hey, I'm grieving. I'm not looking for a new partner. I am focused on the death of my loved one. And that was at least a year. And now we're to that point where we look at people and we say, take your time, take care of yourself, but hurry up and get this funeral planned, and let's get it over with so you can get back on with your life. What a huge difference. What a huge difference. We as people and our needs have not changed, but the way we handle death has changed. Grief is basically the deepest sorrow. And the truth is, 100% of us are going to die. And 100% of us are going to know others that are close to us that are going to die. So we're all going to go through this at some point. And we really need to look at, as a society, how we are handling grief now. You know, we know the person's hurting. That pain can be so insurmountable. You know, it gets better. It's almost like, you know, being in an ocean, if you think about it. And you could be in a part of the ocean where there's barely any waves and you're okay. You're doing okay. And then a ship goes by and causes these massive waves. And they are just hitting you and hitting you and hitting you and knocking you over. And that's where your deep grief starts coming out again. And you don't think you're ever going to get out of that situation. Well, then that ship passes by and finally things settle down again and we're feeling better again. And that's kind of like what grief feels like for the rest of our lives. It's not going to end. It's not going to change. It's always going to be that way. And you know, the truth is, we have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. We have got to get better with allowing people to grieve and to grieve with them. And to not just give them a bunch of platitudes and walk away and go back to your own life. We have to remember it's not a checkbox. That is not a checkbox. We don't say, oh, done that, time to move on. So, you know, when you think about somebody that's gone through a grief, you know, there's never the right thing to say other than just, this fucking sucks. I'm sorry you're going through this because you don't deserve to be going through this. This is terrible. But we can be present with others in their grief. And that could be as simple as just sitting with the person, letting the person talk about their loved one. You know, a lot of people, and I'll admit this, if I put something personal on my Facebook about my child, I get like 2 likes. If I say, hey, I'm going on a trip to South Dakota next week, I'm going to get 55 likes. Because people would rather see me happy than grieving. But I'm always going to grieve, y'all. I'm always going to grieve. And it means a lot to me when people, when I do post something about my son, they say to me, I see you, I feel you. What can I do for you? How can I help you? So just some food for thought, especially about how much things have changed in our society. So that's some Grief 101.4 for you. Thought I'd put that out there. Maybe think about some other things that used to be a certain way that would have been helpful for people to go through their grief that we no longer do. So anyway, I hope that is helpful information for y'all. And I will be back soon with Grief 101.5. But anyway, I hope everybody's having a great night. Talk to y'all soon. Bye, guys.